Welcome back to the program. He joins me now, a friend of mine, a friend of the show, multiple worlds jiu-jitsu champion, and the co-host of the Old Man Grappling Hour, Kevin Gallagher. What's up, my friend?
What's up, brother? Thanks a lot for having me back, man. Always a pleasure to be a guest of yours. Great show, man.
All right, awesome. All right, this is what we're talking about. Multiple UFC fighters in the last couple of days have been handed out suspensions by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. 3 of them for cannabis positive tests in competition. One of them being Luis Pena, another being Tim Elliott. Luis Pena, someone that you should be familiar with, Kevin. He had a fight with a Gracie South fighter, someone that also fights for Longo, Matt Frivola. So when they fought right here in Tampa, had a 3-round war, a very close split decision. That was an awesome fight. And now we see Luis Pena catches some bad luck, really. This isn't really, in my opinion, not a bad look on him. This is actually quite archaic. If you ask me, we're still handing out suspensions and not only giving him a 4.5-month suspension, also Tim Elliott, but also taking 15% of their purse in relation to the bout that they last had in Nevada. I mean, so what are we doing here? We're still handing out suspensions for cannabis and taking money for it.
Yeah, you'll never be able to explain to me or make me believe that cannabis is a performance-enhancing drug. I can't for the life of me understand how they could even consider that to be something along those lines. I mean, it's proven recently that obviously it's great for medicinal purposes. It has great anti-inflammatories, great recovery purposes. I would personally talk to any of my fighters and tell them, man, take cannabis, edibles, maybe not the smoking to mess up your lungs, but hey, Nate Diaz runs triathlons, smokes 3 blunts every day, 4 blunts every day. So how can you really say it has issues with that? I've known lots of fighters that I've talked to, Elias Thurdo I've talked to before. He talked about that, smoking cannabis doesn't affect his cardiovascular system. It doesn't it doesn't advance your performance whatsoever. It's literally like an episode of Reefer Madness that the UFC is trying to perpetrate on its fighters. It's crazy to me.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here, as I've done already earlier on my show. Kevin, let me just say this. As somebody, I'm speaking as someone who myself has been a cannabis and a CBD user for many years, and I say that here openly only because I have my medical card from the state of Florida. So I obtain it and I use it legally, and I don't do anything I'm not supposed to with it. So with that said, is cannabis really not a performance-enhancing drug? What do we all do? Well, not all of us, but you and I and a lot of people we know, what do we do after we have a strenuous day or a hard workout, or when you as you being a multiple black belt in jiu-jitsu, training all the time at a very high level, you use CBD, right? You use cannabis, and these things help you to recover. So what I'm getting at is, if you're going to have a fight that night and you have just the right amount of cannabis and maybe the CBD as well, which I don't think is illegal. I think it's just the THC, the tetrahydrocannabis metabolites that they'll catch you for, not the CBD metabolites. So those are perfectly fine. But the THC also works the same way in respect to recovery and to maybe numbing a little bit of pain as well. And we're fighting in this sport, right? So pain is very relevant. Before tossing it back to you, it reminds me a lot of, in the late 90s, Mike Tyson getting a very raw deal from my native state, Michigan, and never being allowed to fight in Michigan again after winning a fight there and testing positive for cannabis while he was in Michigan. So they took the win away from him and they banned him from Michigan for life. Mike Tyson. So I kind of think in a way it can be a performance-enhancing drug. I just think it's archaic and ridiculous that we're still demonizing it in the sports when it's actually going to help athletes a lot better than any opiates or anything like that would.
I guess, it's funny you bring that to my attention in that manner. It's because I've never thought of it in that way. And it was a very good play on devil's advocate, because it actually enlightened me to a different aspect of that. It does. When you're smoking marijuana, there's obviously a feeling of euphoria. There's obviously a feeling of numbness, and obviously a feeling of anti-inflammatory, whatever you want to call it, to make you not feel the pain is bad. And that heightened sense of awareness, maybe it is an unfair advantage to someone that doesn't smoke marijuana at the time. But I struggle greatly a lot with the idea of banned substances in general. Like I think that the lines they draw for performance enhancing drugs is kind of a weird point of no return. I think there's lots of things on that list that are just like, are you serious? Like, come on, is that really a performance enhancing drug? And at the end of the day, people take protein powder all the time. People take, freaking, I don't know, things,
Pre-workout, caffeine.
Pre-workout, all these other things that they take openly and all the time. How can we not say that that's not unnaturally affecting their performance?
Well, I have to interject. Those are most of them are actually banned in USADA. So pre-workouts, a lot of those things, caffeine, are all banned in competition. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure, I don't want to stand tall with the statement but from my understanding, if you drink coffee on fight day, I think it's banned. Caffeine is banned, and most of those pre-workout supplements and all that are completely banned in competition, which means while you're at the facility for fights. So so when you get there, let's say it's Wednesday or Thursday, and you're there for fight week, and your fight's on Saturday. While you're there, you need to be clean of cannabis. You need to be clean of caffeine and pre-workouts and all of these things that are actually daily routines for most people and athletes, but are actually banned while you're there in competition. So, and that's the same with cannabis. I'm sorry, I just wanted to finish that point. For some of our listeners on our radio program, and some of the listeners on the radio that aren't really that familiar with sports, cannabis is only banned in competition while you're at the facility before and shortly after the fight. So once you're kind of gone from the facility after that,
it's going to last in your system for 3 days anyway. So if as long as you'd literally, most of the time, you'd have to be high either shortly before the fight or after the fight to pop positive.
Correct. And they've actually done a really good job. And you won't hear me say that a lot about the anti-doping agency, USADA. But they did a fantastic job on splitting the hairs on the threshold of THC metabolites that they have to find for you to be violating the policy. So basically, they've figured out the threshold of THC in your urine sample that you basically would have to smoke the same day for it to be for you to be violating. So,
which is crazy to me. I can follow the logic on that because you're looking to protect safety. You're looking to protect fighter safety, and I wouldn't imagine ever getting into an actual MMA fight high. I just can't think how that, when you walk into the cage at UFC high, I just don't see how that could even register in your brain as a good idea.
And you have to remember, the state athletic commissions are government appointed by the governor of the state. And in Florida, I understand 2 officials in the commission are governor appointed. Like, that's DeSantis and his predecessors appoint these 2 people in the commission, and the rest are hired accordingly, but not appointed by the governor. Point being, they're government ran. These are government agencies, and cannabis is a federally illegal Schedule I substance, and we have to keep that in mind. So, in essence, if fighters are allowed to do something, and that's probably the reason Nevada State Athletic Commission has to give them suspensions. Like they did for Luis Pena and Tim Elliott, when in reality, outside of the cage in Nevada, marijuana is completely legalized in Nevada recreationally for those over the age of 21, and they still give those handouts, handing out those pink slips to those athletes in their state. Reason being, because they would be condoning, because a federal agency would be condoning cannabis. I might be overthinking this, but I think that it makes sense in my head anyway.
Yeah, I can follow that train of logic, and just like I said, there's a feeling of reefer madness that floats around when I hear guys talk about being suspended for cannabis.
It's ridiculous.
It seems
Reefer
ridiculous.
madness is. I mean,
Yeah.
that's great that you bring that up, because when I say that the Nevada State Athletic Commission handing out these suspensions is archaic, it's exactly what I'm talking about. Is reefer madness in the 1920s or 30s, a very archaic propaganda video that really kind of started it all as far as the mainstream and parents. And so as far as drugs being scheduled, and we're not going to sit here and get into how the civil rights movement had a lot to do with a lot of street drugs being scheduled, but granted, most of them need to be, and most of them shouldn't be around, and I'm not condoning them at all. But back to our topic is Luis Pena, Tim Elliott, two UFC athletes, two prominent fellas doing a good job, hit by a really bad deal. Now, the next person we're going to talk about, I'm not going to give them so much of the same pass. And I don't know if you will either, Kevin Gallagher. If you're just joining us, this is the Octagram. I'm Mark Charles. You can follow me on social media at Mark Charles MMA, and the show the Octagram MMA on all social media. My guest right now, Kevin Gallagher, multiple time jiu-jitsu champion, and he's also the black belt co-host. Sorry, of I just had to. I mean, you're a 92-time world champion, right?
I'll take what you get. It's
like 90.
It's 93, but after 90, 87, you just quit counting.
I just basically every time you're on the show, I double it. So we're in the 90s now. So you're a 93-time world champion. And of course, you can catch Kevin and Sonny Parlin on their podcast, The Old Man Grappling Hour, where they talk about more than combat sports, apparently. We won't get on that here because there's no politics on this show, buddy.
It's not fit for radio.
All right. So I teased our next topic. The next person that got a suspension from the brass of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, they popped for amphetamines. Okay. And that is a little bit of a different story than cannabis. I'm not talking about methamphetamines for those of you listening, not privy to athletes, athletics, and performance enhancing drugs. I understand when you hear amphetamines, you'll think of, maybe somebody with a lot of energy on some drugs. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about amphetamines that are usually part of performance enhancing drugs, part of certain supplements that people take that really in essence are the epitome of performance enhancing drugs. Now, they're not necessarily going to be steroids all the time. They're not always going to be testosterone or your Deca or whatever different brands and the popular steroids are. A lot of these things are reasonable for somebody to take. A lot of them are a lot of the PEDs that a lot of these fighters in the UFC and other places get caught taking. A lot of them are actually for people that have a certain white blood cell count, and they need to take this to give them a better white blood cell count. So when a fighter takes it, TJ Dillashaw, when a fighter takes it, they end up having a much better threshold of cardio and they can go longer and they can do a better weight cut, and there's just this advantage, right? So it's not a steroid. That would be a medicine for a patient that has issues with their blood,
right? That
athletics have found a way to use. So when I get back, we'll talk about this next fella, and I'll bring up one name, and I love this guy, and he's one of my favorite people in the sport, but this person has been in USADA for 20 years, and they've been multiple two-time two-weight champion of the UFC, Daniel Cormier. It's his prodigy. His prodigy hasn't even made it into the rankings yet, Darren Wynn. When we get back, we'll talk about that. I'm Mark Charles. I'm joined by Kevin Gallagher. You're tuned in to the Octagram. Welcome back. I'm Mark Charles, joined by Kevin Gallagher. He's my friend. He is the co-host of the Old Man Grappling Hour, also multiple-time world jiu-jitsu champion. Kevin, before the break, I teased the man Darren Wynn. He's a middleweight in the UFC. He's really, I have to say, no offense to the man, but he's best known for being Daniel Cormier's protege. He's kind of in Daniel Cormier's shadow. I see a lot of nepotism happening there with Darren Wynn getting into the middle of the weight division, being such a small, short man and not as skilled as somebody his size should be to be in the middleweight division, in my opinion. But the story goes like this. Daniel Cormier is a former Olympic team wrestler for the United States. He's a former college wrestler. He is a former 2-weight champion in the UFC. He's a former Strikeforce heavyweight champion. He has all the accolades that a combat sport athlete could ever ask for. But the one that I like the most about him is that for the last 20 years, dating all the way back to when he was on Team USA for the wrestling team in the Olympics, Daniel Cormier has been subscribed to the United States Anti-Doping Agency testing pool, which is random, which is very, very strenuous. If I could sort of paint a picture of how hard it is to be a part of the USADA testing pool, it could be 3 a.m. and your wife could be 8.5 months pregnant and you guys are sleeping, and USADA is going to knock on your door and they're going to wake you up and they're going to make you have to give them a sample of your whatever they ask for, whether it's urine or blood. And if you somehow try to weasel out of it, they will violate you for it. You will end up being suspended from the sport and from the career that pays your bills and gives you money. So athletes, they know what they're signing up for. They're not a hostage by any means. They can opt out at any time they want. They just won't be eligible to fight. But it's a really tough place to be in. The second point I'll make about how tough it is to be a part of USADA, which makes Daniel Cormier's 20 years as a combat sports athlete so impressive, is that you also have to check in on a mobile app everywhere you go for the United States Anti-Doping Agency. If you're going on vacation, you have to tell them where you'll be, which room you'll be in, at what hotel, because you can rest assured, Kevin Gallagher, that the United States Anti-Doping Agency has weasels in every country, in every corner of the world, ready to come and collect your bodily fluids. It's like that. It's tough to be a part of that. So Daniel Cormier for 20 years now has gone clean with so many tests. I think he's had I remember he had the t-shirt for 50 clean tests in the UFC. That was just the UFC alone.
UFC, right.
I mean, he's been tested for many years before the UFC. 10 or 15 years before being in the UFC, he was getting tested by USADA. So that's a big part of his legacy. And then now he goes off into the sunset, not the way he always wanted to, but he's off into the sunset with a lot of respect from the fans. And now his protege, Darren Wynn, this middleweight, pops dirty with USADA for amphetamines, gets handed a 9-month suspension plus $1,800 fine in relation to the Gerald Marchant loss at UFC 248. I have to correct myself. Darren Wynn got suspended by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, but everything I was talking about with USADA stands, of course, with Daniel Cormier. But Darren Wynn got caught by the NSAC, which doesn't matter who you get caught by. You get caught, right. You get caught. And amphetamines, I don't care what you're taking, unless you're prescribed by your doctor and it's something that you need to be taking. Anything with amphetamines in it is not going to be something that you should be taking. And I can say that Darren Wynn was probably trying to get an edge. There's no other reason someone would have something like that in their body, especially during a fight.
Two things to talk about in particular when we talk about this. It's going to be interesting to see DC's response to this scenario, simply because you said Darren Wynn is his protege, and obviously Daniel Cormier prides himself on his character, on his clean status throughout the course of 20 plus years of competing. It's going to be interesting to see how he deals with this in the public persona, how he works with his fighter, how upset he is about that. Both of us know Daniel Cormier pretty well, not personally, but we know who the person he is and the way he's dealt with things like this in the past. And it's probably going to be very diplomatic. I'm sure he'll give the kid another chance and ask him what happened, get his side of the story, all those other things. But, the big thing I wanted to talk about when we talk about PEDs is this. In the case of Darren Wynn, yes, 100%. He has taken a substance that is advancing his performance that could possibly endanger his well-being throughout the course of his competing, right? So,
and more importantly, the well-being of his opponent.
More importantly, the well-being of his opponent, exactly. But just to put it in this aspect, and this is when I think about the reason why performance-enhancing drugs are illegal in the first place, and it's based upon this. So, performance enhancing drugs aren't necessarily illegal because they give athletes an athletic advantage, because there are lots of things that give athletes an athletic advantage. You know what I mean? Training extra hard, eating clean, all these different things that are not banned that fighters do in order to find that advantage to be better, right? To beat their opponents. The reason why performance enhancing drugs are illegal are because they potentially do harm to the human body. So by taking massive amounts of, ephedrine or what was it? Narcotic, whatever the narcotic was you said, I can't remember what it was.
Amphetamine.
But amphetamine. By taking massive amounts of amphetamine, like, you were putting your body in physical harm. Your brain isn't working correctly. Like, your body can overreact. You can get overheated. Bad things can happen to you. So it's unfair based upon that to expect someone else to take the same thing you're doing to put themselves in harm's way. Like, steroids have horrible problems with your liver, horrible side effects, hormonal side effects that come from taking too much testosterone, DECA, all these other crazy things. So it's unfair to say, well, he's taking it, so you should take it too. Screw your health, right? That's the reason why performance enhancing drugs are illegal. What I've noticed a lot, in particular when you talk about THC, is that the idea of, these performance enhancing drugs aren't necessarily doing an obscene amount of damage, whereupon other people can choose to take them. So, like, other people can choose to take a protein shake, if you like, can choose to take some kind of a pre-workout supplement to get through their day, as long as it doesn't inflict damage. I think that a lot of things are getting banned that aren't following that same equation.
Interesting. So Darren Wynn gets handed 9 months, so he's on the shelf. All of these suspensions, I believe, date back to March, and they are retroactive.
Right.
And we are in August.
Yeah.
So sorry, in September, the beginning of September. So his suspension's more than halfway through, from what I understand. I believe, I know for sure Luis Pena and Tim Elliott, theirs date back to March.
4 months isn't too bad. 4 months isn't that bad of a suspension. That's almost the distance between two fights. Most people aren't fighting more than 4 months in between fights. Anyway,
and to be fair, they were just handed the suspensions, and I believe it's been far more than 4 and a half months since.
And the retroactive part of it makes it a little bit easier to swallow. But
right, exactly.
It's sad. It's sad to me that guys are potentially, because now it's just one pop. You get popped again, it gets worse and worse and worse as you go along. It's sad to me that guys are being, having money taken away from having to go through these issues simply because they felt like smoking a little weed. It just makes me crazy. I don't understand it. You can never make me understand it. I get the idea when you talked about the fact that, maybe you're in a state of euphoria while you're fighting. But in my opinion, if you're going to fight high, I don't think that's an advantage, to tell you the truth, between you and me. I don't care what
depends on the
Eddie
person.
Bravo or Nate Diaz has to say.
It depends on the person. I don't want to get into a drug conversation at all, but I think it's a lot like any kind of drug. It doesn't matter if it's alcohol or even a cigarette or even a hard drug. Every single substance has a different effect on every single person. Right. So some people might not be able to perform this as well as they would be able to without cutting that edge for themselves, or not getting an edge over the person they're competing with, but getting rid of the edge that's holding them back from their potential. And I'm not trying to sound prolific or anything, but it's just, some people need to get rid of that edge to just kind of let their mind be able to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, I can see that. Some people take, the reason why a lot of people take marijuana is to lose those inhibitions, to go into that trance-like state, so that those issues that might psychologically have tormented them aren't there anymore. And I can understand that from that point of view. It's still, though, I don't know, makes it difficult for me to see. I still have issues understanding that in my mind. And we can agree to disagree on that, I guess.
And honestly, it's a beautiful conversation, because it's a forever conversation. For as long as our Homo sapiens will exist, as long as we're going to be on this earth, this will be a discussion forever. So it's nice to be able to continuously sort of churn it out and work it out, because it's never going to end. In a few years, I'll think differently about it. A few years ago, I thought it should be recreationally legal in every state. Today, I don't believe that so much.
No.
I'm not against it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against that decision if that happened, but I'm not someone who's marching for it by any means. So I think we all evolve of the way that we feel about these things as time goes on. And those things evolve because when I was younger, those things weren't nearly as strong as they are
that's
today.
part of the problem too.
A lot of things evolve, and like I said, I don't want to get too, but just generally speaking, everything sort of evolves. So even if we sort of have a disagreement today about it, that's perfectly fine. I mean, this is something that is going to live on forever, and the way that we've disagreed on it is kind of wonderful and beautiful compared to the way politics and the way that deals with these subjects. We deal with it as humans, and we talk to each other like humans, and we listen to each other. Other people are thinking about their billion-dollar, packs and friends and the tobacco companies and the liquor companies, and that's not how we think about it. We think about it like, well, what's the best thing for us, right? Kevin, I want to give you a few seconds to close on this so I don't steal the show, but we do have to wrap up pretty quick here.
First of all, it's pretty amazing to me that on the Octagram MMA show, two old jocks get to solve the world's problems. Thank you for allowing me to do that. I feel like a better person today because of that. And just to bring up the issue of PEDs, again, I feel for these young guys that marijuana is a reason why they're going to be losing their paychecks over the next few months. Darren Willis took the amphetamines. Dan Wynn, I can't take him out of the loop for that. He should be punished for that. But the marijuana thing, it's going to be difficult for me to figure out a way to do that. To figure a way to justify that in my brain that guys are getting shit canned for that.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, and I felt that way since the 90s when Michigan did it to Tyson. That was the voice of Kevin Gallagher. He's also on the Old Man Grappling Hour. Check him out on that podcast with my friend Sonny Parlin, also his friend and teammates. I'm Mark Charles, and I'll let the voiceover guy tell you the rest.
You've been listening to The Octagram. Octagram Radio is online on Facebook and on Instagram and Twitter at The Octagram MMA. For video content, subscribe to The Octagram on YouTube at youtube.com/The Octagram MMA. Follow Mark Charles on all social media platforms at Mark Charles MMA.